Hello everyone, this is Tim, and I have Aaron, Azurk83 on the other line, and we are going to talk a little bit about Carcosa. Aaron, you want to say hi?
Hello.
Okay, we're going to try to do something a little bit different here. I'm going to try to do half of the review on my channel, and we're going to try to do the second half on Aaron's channel, and I'll link to his channel below and to the video. But Carcosa itself is put out by Lamentations of the Flame Princess. I think both me and Aaron have done reviews of that RPG in the past. We're both fans.
Yours still exists, mine doesn't.
Oh, yeah, I guess.
We do someday.
but so we're going to talk a little bit about the setting that, if I believe right, it was put out before, and this is sort of a redo of it, an updated version of it. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is the second edition of it. The first edition was, I guess, about 5 years back or so, and
Okay.
it actually ran with 1974 OD&D rules. So this edition's been changed for Lamentations rules. So.
Yeah, and I mean, I was reading through it, and I guess to start out, it definitely has some adult themes, human sacrifice, rituals instead of fancy and magic, things like that. So, that's what we're going to be talking about. So if that's not your thing, maybe you want to check out now. But
Yeah, it's a very, very mature title. It's okay. I'll put it to you this way: if you're a vampire player and you accept mature themes in your game, you will read this game and you'll go, no, I don't really accept that mature themes in my game because, and I'll just be utterly and completely frank, this is the worst thing in the entire book. There is, in fact, the raping and murdering of a child, of a 13-year-old girl in the game at one point as a ritual, and it's terrible, yes, it's shocking, it's awful, but if you can consider it for its purpose, for being a shocking and awful thing that it is basically, what it really tells you is you don't want to be a sorcerer. Then it kind of gives you that insight into sort of how the mind of the designer worked a little bit.
yeah, that's the one thing that I did hear about the past incarnation of these rules, this game, is that that was the thing that was the most shocking, the most out there.
It doesn't go into any more explicit detail than that. We're not talking about fatal though. You know what I'm saying?
No, nowhere near fatal. Okay. So some of the things about the setting is that it's described as a weird science fantasy horror setting. I think that's kind of a cool way to describe it. It has a beautiful, evocative cover. It has a cool poem that's on page 4. And then it just starts to go in and just tells what's different about the setting compared to like other settings. Like it doesn't include clerics or magic users. The sorcerer takes over, and there's only fighters as well. So there's fighters and sorcerers. There's no dwarves, elves, halflings, all kinds of different races of men, mainly dealing with their skin color.
Yeah, a little racism overtones there too, which we put in.
Yeah, I think there's actually 13 different races of men. Purple, orange, and there's colors that can't be described with normal language. I think all what is it?
The two primary colors that don't actually exist in what Earth would notice as a color. One of them is Dome, and the other one is Allfire.
Yeah,
I think
that's correct. Yeah, isn't Jail one too?
Jail is not specifically a primary color though. It's a combination color of Allfire and blue.
So it's a little bit of both.
Kind of like how purple is a combination of blue and red.
Yeah. The book itself has a lot of Cthulhu flavor, which I knew about it going in, but I was surprised how much Cthulhu stuff is in there.
It is a strictly Cthulhian setting. It's basically if you took sort of the Dungeons and Dragons premise and you ripped out the Tolkien and you put in Lovecraft, it sort of ends up going that direction with various overtones for other authors too, obviously, because we have the weird primary colors and the various races of men, that sort of thing.
There's no real magic items in the setting, but there's like alien technology, there's ancient biological technology, and it's an interesting blend of things. I think you could really pick and choose what you like out of the setting to put in something else, but just for the setting itself, it has lots of cool things in it.
It's like the darkest Thundar the Barbarian you've ever heard of.
That's a good way to describe it. Yeah, like for instance, this quote: The world of Carcosa is fraught with the likes of the Old Ones and their spawn, the legacy of the extinct snake men and sorcery, the terrors of empirical reality render utterly unnecessarily the pretense of imagined horrors. So, yeah, it tries to, bring that up a notch, I guess.
Oh yeah, there's a number of interesting points where it basically it follows along with the Lovecraftian mythos, where you have like the Gith and the other the Great Race, obviously, and all the Great Old Ones pretty well make a presence, though some of them are not exactly the standard definition of the Great Old One. If I remember right, Narthalepetep looks nothing like what you would expect Narthalepetep to look like.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of interesting things added to it, like the spawn of how do you pronounce that?
Yeah, it's Shub-Niggurath, I think. Is that what his name is?
Yes, Shub-Niggurath or something to that effect.
We'll get to it. It's further in the notes.
Yeah, a lot of interesting. Sorry, I'm jumping around. I apologize.
That's cool. Do you want to talk about the hit dice and the damage dice to start off with?
Yeah, you go ahead. You can go ahead.
Okay. It's basically the way hit dice are done are random, which sounds kind of strange when Aaron first mentioned it to me, because he read the book first. I was like, wow, I don't think I even understand what you're talking about. But there's a D20 roll, and you look at a chart before every combat, and your hit dice could be D4s or D12s, and your character, let's say, has 4 hit dice. You roll this D20, and okay, I got D8s this combat. Next combat, you might have D4s, or all the way up to D12. So your hit points vary, greatly from encounter to encounter. And if you're beat up enough, you might only have, let's say you have 5 hit dice if you're perfectly, healthy. You can get down to 3 hit dice, so it might, be 3 D4s or 3 D12s for the next combat. So it's kind of random.
It's random on top of random on top of random.
Yeah,
We have the D20 that determines which random die you roll for your hit dice, and we have the D20 that will randomly determine what damage you do with weaponry at each stroke, pretty much. It can be each stroke, but it can also be each combat, just like the hit dice thing. There's a completely and utterly open policy that the writer, Jeffrey McKinney, kind of adds to the book at the very beginning, saying, use all or none of this as you wish. So it kind of gives you that old school flavor of, hack it together, tear it apart, do whatever you want with it. And, very, very succinctly, it's obvious that some people will completely and utterly hate the combat system.
I like that it's unique, and the one thing that really jumped out at me from reading this is before you go into a combat, you have no idea that it's going to be a slam dunk combat or if it's going to be, deadly. Like, even Cthulhu with 57 hit dice, as we talked about before, Aaron, could roll the D20 and get D4s. So you could have 57 D4s that he rolls, and you could get D12 damage for, the weapons that you do. So, I mean, it's interesting because, I don't know, I think it brings in a little bit more of that fear, before combat. Like fighting is scary.
Oh, yeah. And you're not quite sure what your capabilities are going to be going in, what capabilities your opponents are coming in, and it also is somewhat kind of explained away in the sort of non-Euclidean geometry of the setting, saying that, things don't generally make sense all the time in this setting, not even your standard, dice mechanics.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of cool, too, how they go through and say, when you roll your hit dice out, just leave them on the table, and you can literally count down your dice as you're losing, hit points. So I thought that was pretty cool. I think they start out with the highest rolled dice first.
Mm-hmm. And it's a death spiral. Basically, if you get hit on your highest dice, and it'll lower to a lower number, and then you'll actually have to move it across the death spiral and you'll use your next highest dice for the next attack. So you end up with very short hit dice by the end of the combat, or no hit dice.
Yeah. Which I think would probably happen a lot, especially just reading later that there's lots of deadly stuff in this game, so expect that. I think the uncertainty and the randomness we're talking about, the non-Euclidean stuff, really emphasizes the strange and the weird in the setting, and it emulates that in the mechanics. So it's not only a weird setting, but when you're playing it, you're like, wow, this is pretty weird.
Yeah, it'll come across pretty terribly, especially considering that there's the 13 different types of men that are mechanically not represented any different from one another, other than, of course, colors, which is not really a mechanical thing. There's one other little change between each one, but for the most part, yeah, they're relatively indistinguishable unless the GM actually wants to add distinctions between these character types. And I find that that having them all be kind of in the same boat, and then having that boat be rocking quite often, is sort of an interesting setup for it.
Yeah, I mean, I like that there's so many different races of humanity. There really isn't dwarves and elves and halflings. So if you're coming in expecting that, that stuff's not here. It's very human centric. But there's a lot of different types of humans. So, I mean, I think those fill that if that's the niche you like to play, maybe you'll play an all fire human instead. It's a little bit hard to describe and different. Let's see.
Yeah, there are, I think, 2 descriptions to separate all the human types other than color. One is the bone men, who I don't know if you've explained those people yet.
Yeah, aren't they transparent? Is that their skin's transparent? Yeah.
They are entirely transparent other than their opaque bones. And they are the more reviled of everyone. All of these different races, all these different colors of humans, if you will, are not too big a fan of one another, and they actually all dislike the bone men more than they dislike each other for some reason. And at the same time, I think it's the jail men that are considered to be the better sorcerers out of all of the men, but that's all it says on the topic. It doesn't actually give you any mechanics for them being better sorcerers.
We talked about there only being fighters and sorcerers. The actual fighter class is in the Lamentations of the Flame Princess book, so don't expect to find that in here. And it goes in a lot about the sorcery aspect of things. We talked about how it's kind of dark, yeah, it's pretty darn dark. Yeah, it's very dark. It's like pitch black at times. Sorcery was devised by the Snake Men. The old ones are in there, and you can use rituals to banish, conjure, invoke, bind, torment, or imprison these entities. And all the rituals themselves, have links, especially in the PDF, to the things that you're summoning, human sacrifice, components. That's all in there too. Did you notice the thing about the taking adventures to find those components? I saw a few mentions of that.
There is a, I don't know, you want to start talking about the hex crawler now?
We can, I guess we can do that.
All right, there is a massive hex crawl in the game book. It's sort of, as per all hex crawls, it's a very large map with lots of little hexes on it, and each one has 2 descriptions on it. And of those descriptions, there are actually references to various, for example, the sorcery spells in the book. This is where you would learn this particular spell from this person under these circumstances. That sort of thing ends up being one of those hex encounter descriptions. And of course, there are actually spots on the world map where the Great Old Ones are just kind of hanging out.
Yeah, it's sort of like their home base, as it were. It's like, this is where Cthulhu lives,
I don't know if they actually detail Cthulhu's existence on here because he's technically per canon on Earth, but at the same time, I'm sure the city of Relia, or whatever it's called, doesn't really give a shit about our perception of time-space continuum.
One thing that sorcery reminded me of the book is the Book of Ebon Bindings from Tekumel, which is also kind of a dark book as far as that goes. Like the actual sorceress descriptions, what you're actually doing in each of the summons or binding, everything that you're doing in there, like you had mentioned, the rape and the human sacrifice is pretty prevalent, Well, I think the rape's only once, but there's lots of other, mutilations
I checked. There are 3 references to the word rape in the entire book.
Oh, okay.
Just wanted to make sure I get that out there because there's something like 1,400 in Fatal. So I figured 3 is probably a little better for the size of the book, even though it's a terrible, terrible topic. And 2 of those instances were involving Great Old Ones, so they kind of
not pleasant.
More sense for that.
A few other things, I just took some notes here. Sorcerers age if they fail their saving throw for performing some of these rituals, and that's like 1 to 5 years. So if you really mess up, that's probably if you fail to save, you age a little bit. I think you can consider yourself lucky. A lot of the descriptions for the rituals, if you don't make your save, you pretty much die for a lot of the actual rituals.
Well, and at the same time, if you cast any of the rituals at all that don't involve sort of banishing old ones, more than likely you're going to feel dirty about yourself. Yeah. That's one of the real penalties of casting any sorcery in the game, to be honest. not just basically not just as you were saying, the obvious penalty of losing, getting some unnatural aging occurring to your character, but just from the role playing aspect, feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm kind of a degraded turd.
Some other things that are in here. There's psionics. there's psionics, but you have a pretty low percentage chance of actually being able to use that. But fighters and sorcerers can both use psionics.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, good.
As per the rest of the systems in the book, it's ludicrously random. Like you have very little increase in skill over time. In psionics, you have no choice. Basically, each day you'll wake up with 1 to 4 psionic powers.
Yeah. And
they are chosen by the GM. So it could be completely different things each day. There are only 8 to choose from altogether, though. But yeah, and over the course of your levels, you'll have the ability to cast them more than once, or I guess use them more than once. I guess it's not a casting, but yeah, overall you don't really can. Just like everything else, it's kind of gloriously random.
Yeah, and I believe if you have there's 3 stats. It's like intelligence, wisdom, and charisma that you add together to get those chances to learn psionics. So yeah, it's pretty low percentage chance, but it's in there. It talks a little bit about the desert lotus and the effects of it, like powders, powers made from it, those sorts of things. What do you think about the space alien technology that pretty much take the place of the magic items, it seems?
Yeah, they do entirely take the place of the magic items, and they are something that's also kind of hokey and nonsensical out of the setting, really. It's got a lot of that in it because the old ones are in what we would consider aliens, and at the same time we have the Greys showing up and being in the setting as well, and sort of using Carcosa as kind of an intergalactic truck stop, and dropping off their garbage or crash landing into it or doing strange things that we don't quite understand. Just as the old ones will do things we don't understand, the Greys are sort of in the same boat. So it ends up being it can compound it, or it can be really hokey. It really depends, I think, on how the GM portrays the Greys.
And I think it just sort of brings up that weird and strange to me as far as the setting goes. Just as a general summary, it's sort of like anything from like weird 50s sci-fi, any sort of lasers, gizmos. That's all good. So if you can come up with something like that, watch some old Twilight Zone episodes, you'll be fine. Technological artifacts of the Great Race. You basically need to be very smart to 17 intelligence to even use these things, but these are also bizarre, strange, malevolent, and they're more like they're hard even to describe. They list a few of them in there.
Yeah.
Do you have any opinions on those?
They're basically, if you were a fan of sort of how D&D or AD&D does artifacts, and they do them and making them sort of unique items that really that have specific purposes and functions that have kind of been lost to the ages, you end up going down the same boat, except for at the same time they're kind of sort of cursed at the same time to an extent. They're all sort of a mixed bag, but they're all unique, which I think is kind of cool.
There's also technological artifacts from the primordial ones, and these seem to be more biological in theme and scope. So you have that as well. All kinds of stuff in this thing. There's Elder Signs, Deep Ones, Cthulhu, and stuff that we all mentioned. Lots of Cthulhu flavor.
Yeah.
And we talked about the Sorcerer's Rituals. There's a pretty big section dedicated in them, in the book to them. And I like that some of them there's specific details in them, like they must be cast at certain places, certain times. You have to summon certain things, certain numbers of people need to be killed.
Yes.
And I thought the art was pretty evocative in these sections too.
Oh yeah.
Evocative / disturbing, I guess.
It's all pretty decently done line art, I think, throughout pretty much the entire book. I didn't see really much. I guess it's called line art. I'm not an art person. But it's all pretty evocative of the weird, strange, and unusual, and not in an Errol Otis way, which I was kind of surprised by. As soon as I read this game coming out, I was thinking that it would be like sort of a lot of Errol Otis surrealistic artwork, and it's not quite like that, but it still feels kind of wrong.
Uh, I personally like the line art. I'm a big fan of that. I like the old AD&D artwork as well, like the black ink artwork. So I was pretty happy with the actual art, especially the cover. The cover is pretty evocative to me. One other thing I want to talk about, the components for the rituals. Some of them are listed by hex. Like, you need to go to this hex to get this certain thing to cast this certain ritual. So I thought that was kind of cool. It's already in the hexes itself.
And the PDF has got really good useful functionality of linking between the various sections. So you click on, like, say, if it's a specific hex or whatever, you can click on the hex number. It'll switch you to the hex number's location. And then on the sidebar, it'll say, see the ritual that you were just at. And you click on that, and you can actually go back to the ritual you were just at, or whatever it is you were referencing.
This PDF was the easiest that I've ever read. I think it's because Raji usually uses A4 size, so both pages, you can read both pages at the same time on like a laptop computer, and that's what I read PDFs with. So I really like that it's hyperlinked. It was very easy to read. Okay, that pretty much concludes our first part. We're going to go over to Aaron's channel now and continue with the review/thoughts on Carcosa. Thanks for watching.